to Soul Talk. I'm Nancy Roland Weber, and I'd like to share with you something that related to why, when we learned in the US, American history, we only learn from the start of people coming over from Europe, and maybe before that, the Vikings and Columbus and that thing. But people were here for more than 26,000 years. We don't learn that history. We don't learn about the indigenous tribes and what some of them learned, like the Hopis, which, if we had learned all that, perhaps we wouldn't have the strife we have now. If people who came over had understood that, perhaps we wouldn't have the strife we have now. And the reason I'm saying that is something that came to mind, don't remember how long ago. There's a place, I'm not sure if I want to tell you where it is right now. However, Hans Holzer had put out spirit photography and had been photographed several places for haunts, primarily. And there is a place that I think it was for a kind of a little infomercial for Halloween that they asked me to do. And when I got to the, it's an old, I guess, estate. Hans Holzer was there filming and he was finished. And so we got together, took photos and played and said goodbye. And he went home and I was supposed to go in the home and see what I saw. Okay. Well, while he was still going around, I thought, I'm going to walk around. It was a pretty land and had some garden for the garden club now because it's a historic home. And the keeper of the place knew the history. And so she walked with me and I suddenly saw an area. I walked over and I wanted to cry. And I said, this was a sacred burial ground, but it was dug up. She said, yes, it was. And I thought, how atrocious. Who would do that? So I could feel the indigenous people had been there. It was a beautiful sight for them. Probably good agriculture, fishing. And yes, there was water. Hints, but nothing else right now. And then I go in the home. And they're so eager for me to see the woman who was murdered or pushed down the steps, they said, Hans said. And I said, yes, there's a woman standing up there. Like, I'm drawn to the kitchen, not to there. I go in this little kitchen and off, let's see, if you were standing in the kitchen, on the left wall was a doorway going out. But on the facing wall of the kitchen is another door, how would I say it? Can't even think of the word, but it's a catty corner, right? Okay. So it's right opposite, on the left wall. And I hear screams. And I go, that was a dungeon. Yes, it was. So this was somebody from Britain who hated the Americans, took the land, destroyed the burial ground. Oh my God. This was a horrible human being. My take. I'm not saying they were. I've learned to judge the action, not the soul. However, at that moment, that's how I felt. And so there were, I think, third floor. So I was on the first, then I go to the second, go up to the third. They said, why do you want to go there? I said, because I feel something there and I have to pay respects and just see what I see. So there was this glass enclosed table, I guess, but about that wide, the glass from the table itself enclosed. And it was probably about 6 feet long. And it was all that they picked up from the sacred burial ground. And I thought, what does that tell you about some wealthy person who stole the land, dug up all the sacred, knew it was, had to have known. It was common knowledge to pretty much anybody there. I don't know. But if you read the history, you figure, well, even if he didn't know, how'd he know it was anything buried there? What was he looking for? And then proudly has a table built so he could show off what he took. That's American history. Not the only American history, obviously. But I think strongly that when any area does not honor the ancestors, not only your own, but the ancestors who cared for the land worldwide as best as they could. I look at the ancients in other cultures who had irrigation thousands of years ago, brain surgery. They had a lot. And their water wasn't, well, maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but I know that our pollution is much more than it ever was. So why don't we start considering the best of what we've learned from the earth keepers of ancient times and the ones that still maintain it? Let's look around. I do. I don't always do the right thing. I try. No, cancel that word, try. I do the right thing as soon as I know it's the right thing and that I can do it. Recycle, yes. Only recycling sometimes is a big problem, isn't it? But still, we have to recycle as much as possible. And I do. We do at home. I look at purchases now much more thoughtful. A pen. I'd rather get something made, maybe of bamboo or metal that can be recycled than a plastic pen. Simple things. Whatever we can do to start with anywhere and make a difference. That burial ground that was destroyed haunts me. And I'm sharing with you because I know you care. And when we care, there's a rippling effect. And so even that burial ground, you don't have to know where it is. You just know it is. And that probably many other sacred grounds were ruined one way or the other. On a positive note, there is a town in New Jersey called Bordentown. The King of England deeded it to some man whose name I do not recall at the moment. And I know this from a friend, Arlene, who was the guide tour of Bordentown for a long time. I wrote about the history, and then I took a group of children from a school locally on a trip there because of the history. They all felt differently there. They could feel it. When the King of England gave the deed to the man, he came over and sat down with the indigenous people and said, if you agree to sell me the land at the same price I would pay in England for the land, for I am wealthy, and then you would be wealthy, and you would move, and I would have the land to create. And if you do not want to, I will rip up the deed and leave and go back to England. And so they agreed. They took the money. They moved. And so Bordentown was not created in conflict or war. Absolute different feeling when you go through it. And if you happen to be somebody who could envision, as I can, the wonderful visions there to still be seen because the history is not tarnished. It's not scary. It's absolutely loving. And that You don't have to be in the same bloodline directly, although we all are eventually down. If you go further, right? Thousands and thousands of years, we're all part of it. However, they were indigenous, and then there were the people from Europe who came. I don't know what they did in if they took in enslaved people or not. That's something I will look into. I hadn't thought about that because I don't remember seeing any slaves. Because I know some Northerners had. Because and the reason I'm saying it is because even after the land was uh, mostly European, I guess, up until I know maybe 15, 20 years ago, I don't know what they do now, but once a year, all the religious leaders would switch with each other, temples, churches, synagogues, doesn't matter what, and they would all teach because they all got along. And I can recall envisioning World War II, the feeling I had of how it wasn't just one street of community, it was a town that all helped. So I think it's possible not to treat the sacred as if it's on display. So proudly can boast. Dug it up. Let's dig up the most beautiful thoughts, the most beautiful feelings of thank you to all the ancestors who took care of this land long before we came here, or took care of any land that our forefathers founded, or foremothers, whatever we call the people who were here before us. They had to have taken care of enough. We're here, right? So that is my take on American history. I'd like it to even be recalling it something else, so I have another portion of it as prior to it becoming American history, right? And of course, with all the divisiveness, we need to insert our own beliefs lovingly, compassionately for all, and know how fear perpetuates prejudice, and only fear does. So if that man who took the people down in the dungeon, what was he afraid of? I thought he was so powerful. Why'd he dig up the burial? You know, bullies are bullies, but they're bullies because of their fear. So the answer is love, real love, not just a word, right? So one action, find something that improves how you feel about life and how you can help out a little bit at a time. However that works for you, that works for all of us. Thanks and have a great day. This is Soul Talk.